good quote, dude. It's such a great speech. I have it in
Yeah,
my bathroom and it kind of got Adele'd where it's like,
yeah,
Adele has
yeah,
some
yeah.
great songs, dude, but you hear it so much, you're like, I just can't hear it anymore. So, anyways, all right, folks, welcome to the first inaugural maiden voyage of Unscalable. I have the Phoenix powerhouse with me, Mike Manheimer from
What's up,
the
folks?
Postscript. I'm Rabah Rahil. We're your hosts for today. Today, we're going to be talking about hiring, but before hiring, we're going to go into a couple wins and losses to kick it off. What do you got, Mike? What do you got? You said you're doing some AI stuff at the company, personal stuff.
Yeah,
What do you want to drop?
yeah. Let me think. Wins. I think the win that I want to talk about for this episode is just that I've really been challenging myself to get more into the weeds on the AI
Oh, yeah.
implementation.
Yeah.
And I've played with Claude Cowork. I've played with Claude Code. I've vibe coded a couple of apps that have never seen the light of day. I have a Vercel bill that is just fake money that goes nowhere. So I'm in that mode, but actually getting into the weeds of automating processes that are happening inside of our business, I really wanted to challenge myself to get into the weeds on some of that stuff. It's a lot more complicated and there's a lot more edge cases than I think if you just listen to the podcast circuit or you just go to the VC AI roundtables where everyone's like, I'm never hiring another person again. The truth is really far away from that. But in digging in, I think that I've separated the signal from the noise and I can
Yeah.
see where there actually is super meaningful gains to be had if you implement a process methodically and sweat the details. And I think from the early days of vibe coding, where you tell Claude, hey, make no mistakes, build me a lead magnet that does blah 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 blah. It does it pretty good. You're like, oh, this is all magic. Then I went into the trough of sorrow and realized it's not exactly all magic like that. But I'm coming out of it now. Now I see the light of where the AI implementations can actually be very useful to driving the business forward. And some of the stuff was a little bit, I think, naive. But now that we're getting into the real world implementation, it's really exciting. And I think, I'm proud of myself, my team, the Postscript organization. Everyone's really diving in head first and
Yeah.
getting into the nitty gritty. And that's really exciting. I think loss of the week, I would say, is with all of that comes complexity. I cannot tell you how many problems I see. Someone says, hey, did you know this was happening? And I'm like, what the heck? We should do XYZ. Let's solve this right away. And I'll get on the call with somebody to give them the feedback about the bad process or the bad outcome or whatever. And what I find is that there's actually 100 really, really good reasons for why this thing is the way that it is. And I just think shout out complexity, man. The losses I've been taking this week is you try to dig in and swipe of the pen. We all think, we're executives. We can just solve anything we want. But really, it took some L's this week just because I wasn't giving enough respect to the complexity of running an org of our size going through as much change as it's going through. And I felt like every time I was peeling back the onion, there was 100 other layers. And, I ate a little bit of humble pie this week, trying to oversimplify the stuff that was in front of us. So those are my wins, some AI wins, some getting some signal out of that, and then some losses. You want everything to be silver bullets, but we say this thing at Postscript all the time. There's no silver bullets. There's only lead bullets. Lead bullets only. There was a bunch of things this week that I was like, man, we run a really big, complex business, and I need to have a little bit more respect for the nuance. I was oversimplifying some things.
Man, I couldn't agree with you more there on that. I think all the SaaS apocalypse stuff is way overblown. I think, to be fair, I think shitty and mediocre SaaS is going to die, as it should. Creative
Totally.
destruction, capitalism, it is what it is. But I think not only the complexity technically, but a lot of people, there was a great tweet where you can outsource your thinking to AI, but you can't outsource your reasoning. And I
Right.
think that's kind of, a lot of people just don't go through the idea maze. And that's really where the magic is. Playing with the product, breaking it, understanding it, seeing these complexities, seeing these edge cases, seeing how people are actually going to use it. And so a lot of AI, in my experience, has been absolutely exquisite up to the demo. And then you start playing with it, you're like, oh yeah, this isn't like I'm going to walk into the gym in a suit and get some reps in. This is like, oh dude, this is a hit class and I'm going to sweat, I'm going to break. And I think a lot of things like versioning history, nobody has any idea how to do. There's just a lot of fundamentals that are really still big impediments to understanding like the problem you're trying to solve. And I think when you don't have the expertise, you want to throw everything at it. It's kind of like the mid-twit meme of like
Yeah, totally.
when you're dumb, you just don't use anything, like just use the
Y-
notes app. And then when you're like good, you want to tell everybody, look, I'm using 78 AIs to make, and then just use the notes app. And so I think AI is like that. When I used to climb, it was the same thing where I wanted all this gear and stuff. And I had my climbing partner was just this old, well, not old, but like older guy that was just an insane climber. And he'd literally just take basically a belay, some rope, and some anchors. That's it. And I have like this huge set of kit on me and stuff like that. So I think that's been something really interesting to see is make it as simple as possible, but no simpler. And I think that's actually a lot harder than many
yeah.
people think. It's the corollary Mark Twain. I wrote you a long letter because I didn't have time to write you a short one.
Yeah, 100%. I think about like we're B2B marketers. Unfortunately or fortunately, we're B2B marketers. So people listening to this, if you're a B2B marketer, you understand like, the job's about, driving interest in the business and
Yep.
monetizing that in the pipeline so you can sell a deal. And, as it relates to AI, um, like, is AI capable of automating some of the pipeline process? Well, like if what we're talking about is someone types in your brand's email or your brand's website, goes to the website, types all their information into a form and says, I have $100,000 that I'd like to give you before this date. Can you set me up with the rep? AI can totally handle that process. I think if we're all intellectually honest though, we collectively precisely get like 4 of those a year. And so what about all the other ways we generate pipe that we all
Yep.
have to do? There's like a billion edge cases and scenarios, and we need to take everything off the table that we can get. So you can't really make that many mistakes. And, no one's playing in, the infinite consumer TAM in B2B. So you can't let stuff fall on the cutting room floor either. So it's actually kind of higher stakes, and the ACVs make it even higher stakes. So it's just, it's very nuanced. The midwit meme is the goat in describing all business questions and challenges. You're totally right. And it's getting there. You should automate what you can, but there's still a lot of process engineering that needs to be thought about, and all the edge cases. And I think like, once the magic wears off, you can really get to the building of something that'll make your business more efficient.
Yeah, you nailed it. But I will say, get into it. Start playing with it, start breaking stuff. And I think what has been helpful for me was I just started, and you just start with like fun things. And I just started with, hey, my health. And I just started dumping stuff into a Claude Code project, blah, blah. And now I have a fully functioning iOS app that is doing a bunch of really cool stuff. So I think don't let us scare you away, but I think the challenge is if you start with something really complex and really high, that's too much pressure versus like,
hmm
dude, who cares if this thing works or not? It's more about learning and building that muscle of, okay, cool. I want to use this Claude Code project. I want to, okay, understand the CLI, the terminal doesn't scare me, things like that. That has
Yeah.
been really, really useful. So I would really encourage people to, at worst, just play with shit. But yeah, that's free game from Mike. I think my wins.
You're only going to get burned by not knowing the details for sure.
That's exactly right, dude. And I think experience exposure is a really great way to, like, when you have a problem, you learn the solution. But if you're just inundated with solutions without the problem, I think it's hard to stick there.
Yeah. What about your wins, your losses for the
What
week?
did I do? So my big wins, I think, were kind of coming back. So I was just in Europe for 29 days. Great trip. Ripped all over the place. Got to do the Orient Express, bucket list of mine.
Awesome.
But I think the big win was actually coming back in and kind of solidifying the next phase of my life. I know it sounds kind of
hmm
cheesy, but starting my own company. We're starting a new podcast.
Yeah.
I'm writing again, so I have a new newsletter, shameless plug, coming out. So that was really fun to write. It hadn't. Essay Rob, a really good friend of mine, said Essay Rob is the happiest Rabah, and he was right. So I have a really fun essay coming out that I'm really excited about. And then I think the loss was I've been really amped up, and so I've been really bad about my sleep. And
hmm
then to make it worse, I don't know if you saw that big article, but like all the sleep trackers, I guess, drive neuroses about
Oh yeah.
stressing about your sleep. So I've kind of fallen into that little negative feedback cycle. So what I'm going to do is I'm still tracking all my stuff, but I'm not going to look at anything for a week, and then I'll come back and see how it impacts me. But I'm old now. We're both very ripe in our age. And there's no antidote like youth, but man, when you get older, sleep is really important. And there was a really great article that came out where It's crazy. If you get 2, because I had this delusion I just need 6 hours,
Right.
but if you get 2 nights of 6 hours of sleep or less, you're actually operating at somebody that has actually stayed up 40, and the worst part is you start to lose your ability to understand that you're impaired, and so you don't know that you're operating at 20% or whatever, so that's a big loss for me is I need to get the sleep in there, so kids, get your sleep in. It's a natural steroid, man. It's a natural steroid.
It's crazy. I think two things. One is sleep, and then also, the alcohol consumption, right?
I haven't
And like,
drink yeah, that's a big one.
so like, there's like a couple days ago, maybe it was a week ago, where I felt awesome. I like woke up, my wife and I are having coffee, making breakfast for the kid, and I was like, I feel great today. And it was like, I didn't have a glass of wine with my dinner the night before. I got really good sleep, and it's just the basics, right? But like that stuff,
So funny, dude.
especially at our old age, it makes a huge
It
difference.
makes a big difference.
And it's interesting that like the ability to recover, youth is a hell of a drug, but like then the delta in these little tiny tweaks that you make, the
Brother.
way you feel it shows up crazy. Like
Yep.
I day to day just felt completely, utterly different.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I wish I didn't have to care about this stuff but I do. And it just is wild how big of a difference it can make if you get it dialed in.
Nailed it. Get your sleep, kids. Drink less if you can. If you're
Yes.
young, have some fun, be curious, be crazy, but as you get older, man, the hangover memes are real. They're real.
Oh yeah.
Okay, let's get
Brutal.
into the first segment of the show. So we're gonna split this up. Art, I'm like the crazy drunk uncle, and then the science. Mike is the stoic, smart, feet on the ground dad. So today we're gonna talk about hiring. I think hiring is probably one of the most important functions you have as a leader in the
Mhm.
org. So Mike's running multiple orgs now. I used to run marketing orgs. I think it's a really important. I think if you go up to the number one leader at the company, a CEO, I think vision and hiring are kind of the two jobs of a CEO. You could argue that, but I think those are really, you need to, especially early on, you need to get the right people in. So let me give you my take on hiring, Mike, and I want you to push back on me.
Sure.
So the first thing is I hire on vibe. And I know a
Mhm.
lot of people hate that. I think there's two things there. One, work's going to be a big part of your life. And if you're around people that really don't make it meaningful for you or just make the easy things hard, I think that just becomes a challenge. I also think when you hire wrong, it can be really hard to admit that.
Mhm.
And so I'm more of a hire when I have pain, not hire into the future. Cause I think when you hire into the future, you can get into some challenges if you don't have the future pegged or if the future changes, COVID, things like that, that who could
Right.
predict those things. I also think that the Netflix people have it right where you should be able to defend why you want to keep that person and that employee and testify for them. They call it the
Mhm.
keeper test at
Yep.
Netflix. They also had something that really landed with me personally is I think family is the wrong metaphor for a company. Actually, it's like kind of nails on the chalkboard for me. And this was the Netflix realization when they had to go through all the layoffs. And then they switched to a sports team. I think that's a much better where everybody's trying to win the championship, but you don't fire your brother or divorce your wife because they're underperforming. Yeah, or maybe the wife is
Right.
bad idea, but you get what I'm saying. And so I think the sports team is a better analogy for me. Ultimately, my best hires have come from vibes. So Kevin, my first hire at Triple Whale, wonderful human. We had one meeting. This guy was running communities at Yelp. And I was
Mhm.
like, he had no idea what B2B SaaS was, nothing like that. He was fantastic. In less than 6 months, Narwhal Nation, our Slack community, was over 6,000 people. I mean,
Mhm.
it was one of the best communities out there. He was just the events, he threw everything. So I would say be open about vibes. And the last thing that I would say is be open about taking random meetings that don't have outcomes. Cause this is
Mhm.
one of the Lex was probably my best hire, but I was like courting her, following her. I thought she was just going to be great. And this is actually I'm kind of rambling here, but a corollary. When you find talent, make room for them. I actually didn't have a role for Alexa. I was like, you are super talented. I know you're going to do great work. Do you want to become head of brand? Do you want to do this? Do you want to do head of content? Blah, blah, blah. And I just made a role for her and we figured it out. So I think if you don't have a role for somebody, but you find talent, I would absolutely make room in them. And then the spontaneous thing was Kevin. Actually, I just told him, hey, every Friday, get random people on my calendar. I just want to meet cool people.
Hmm.
And I met this guy named Sonder. It was like a Friday afternoon. Oh my gosh, I don't want to do it. I'm burnt out from the week. Whatever. I said I was going to do it. I was going to do it. I take the call. MO did all this crazy stuff. He was leaving his gig or whatever. And then it ended up turning into a hiring call, and we ended up hiring him. He was a fantastic hire. So I think the too long didn't read is vibes are important, spontaneity in your life, and make room for talent are kind of the three takeaways for me. What pushback do you have? Because you're
Yeah.
way more leveled than I am.
Yeah, I will. Here's what I'll say. I totally agree that when you spot talent and you know it's the right thing, you have to figure out how to jump
What a
on
good
it.
job.
Got to figure it out. When I joined Gainsight back in the day, it came from exactly that. I met with the CMO of Gainsight. We just connecting. He
Yep.
had recently moved to Phoenix. We're trying to build the Phoenix connection. We had dinner, and I didn't know this at the time, but he told me, like, he called the CEO that night and was like, what do I do? Like, I have no open recs. I have to try to hire this person.
Yes.
We made it work out, and the rest was history, and it was a great thing. So I totally agree. Like, see the potential, you should totally jump on it.
100%.
But and I'm a huge fan of vibes, right? I feel the vibes. I'm a CCO now, but my path to the CCO seat started as a support rep.
Yep.
And the only reason I got an opportunity to expand into marketing was because somebody took a bet on me.
It's a great
And
point.
a lot of that had to do with their feeling, their
Yeah.
vibe with me as an employee. So I'm a big believer in vibes. I have benefited from vibes massively in my career. So, but the part that I do want to push back on a little bit is there's a skill in this, right? Like ultimately what we're talking about is judgment, right? It's like business judgment.
That's a really good point.
So some people, I'll use you as an example, like you've got what, 15, 16, 17 years of marketing experience being a marketing leader. You've seen all the patterns, you've honed in that recognition. And so the
Really good
vibe
point.
test probably works okay for you. But your average person, especially like people who are not hiring for the function, like imagine CEO trying to hire their first marketing person. I think it's really hard for people to not end up just hiring people that they want to get a beer with
Yeah.
and not hiring people who they feel like can add lots of value to
Super
their
fair.
business. And there's like obviously a tension there. So it's like, I think it's a skill issue thing. If you can do it, if you can use your intuition to be able to find excellent people from a performance point of view who will also vibe well with the existing team or be
Yeah.
the first person to expand that culture, then great. I just think most people can't do that. And that's why there's analysis out there. There was a paper that came out, I think it was from Frank Schmidt, that was saying that structured interviews, for example, predict job performance 2 times better than unstructured ones.
Wow.
And so the data says that structure in this process results in higher performing teams. Now, does that mean that you can't be Rick Rubin of hiring and just vibe it? Like you totally can. You totally can. But I think everyone who's going into this needs to look into the mirror and say, am I Rick Rubin? And if you are, then cool. But if you're not, you probably need to have some structure in place so that you don't end up just hiring people you want to get beers with, because unless you're literally a brewer, that's not what we're trying to do. We're trying to build software companies here. So I think the answer is it depends.
That's sensational pushback. This is the dichotomy we're going for. That's a great statistic, by the way. I think you're absolutely right there. I think that I would soften my stance on what I just said in terms of I still stand by it, but I used to have this guy who did all my fitness stuff, really good friend of mine. He's actually the nutritionist at the Memphis Grizzlies now, but we used to work out together all this time. Anyways, the point being that he was like, yeah, dude, all this stuff matters, yada, yada, yada. But what about LeBron James? He's like, okay, yes, LeBron James doesn't have to worry about that. But it's safer to assume you're not LeBron James than to assume
Yeah.
you're LeBron James. And so I think that's a really good point is if you don't have either and again, that's not a judgment, like horses for courses. If you don't have it, use these systems, use these structured interviews, because you're absolutely right. I think there is definitely something that has came about this intuition of hiring that I've had a really good run of hiring in a very, if you were outside looking in, Wild West type of way that would make, a Fortune 500, Fortune 1000 company kind of puke a little bit in their mouth because there was just so little. Like I literally had one call with Tommy at Triple Well,
Yeah.
just basically on a walk, like, "Hey, man, what are you doing? You seem like you're good. Dude, you wanna run on your social media? Okay, cool." Like, you know what I mean? Like, and so I think you're absolutely right in the vibe checks. Okay, let me ask you this then. So, I think if you're not Rick Rubin, which is totally fine, by the way, the Creative Art is a fantastic read. If you guys haven't read it, his book is wonderful. Go check it out. If not Rick Rubin, don't follow the vibes check. Use some of the, and we'll give you guys some artifacts after the show. Go sign up for the newsletter and we'll send it to you. But some ways that you can have these interview questions, interview structure. Because I think you're right. What's your take on CEOs meeting every hire early on? Do you have a view on that? Like, did Beller and everybody hire, or like to meet everybody, like the first 100 hires or whatever?
I think that it wasn't about the micromanage. It sounds probably micromanaging to be like, I have to have the final
Yeah,
say. I think what they were doing is they were just trying to be really intentional about the culture that they were
I think that's
creating
very
for
smart.
this business. And that's not just on it's not, it's a balance between the vibe and the performance side of
100%.
it, right? Because it's not one or the other. People have, heard of if you have uh, someone who's a high performer, but they're also an asshole, that'll be
Yeah,
just as detrimental, maybe even more detrimental than someone who is maybe slightly lower on the
yeah,
performance scale, but that is a culture carrier, right? And they might have even a bigger impact in a bunch of different sort of like off the scorecard ways. And so I think the founders at Postscript wanted to meet with folks because they wanted to make sure that they were going to be a good steward of the values, which were, everyone talks about their values. Ours were meant to be a filter.
yeah,
We didn't just make generic ones that were on a
yeah,
poster somewhere. Like, they're meant to be like, you should be able to make a decision once you understand these values, and we interview according to them,
yep,
whether or not this is or isn't the place for you. And they
yep.
were honing in on that. And like, some of that stuff is not for everyone. Like, one of our values are feach, and the A in feach stands for animal. And it's like, are you an animal? How intense are you? you know and so, like, if you're not intense enough, like, we want to get that out in the interview
Yep,
process, because we don't want you to get started and go, all these people around me are freaks, I can't work in this environment.
yeah,
And so, that's an example of, I think, what they were trying to hone in. I think maybe they met like the first like 60 or 75 people, and then from there the system started to scale
yeah.
itself. But yeah, I think they were just trying to be very intentional about the culture that we wanted to create, because undoing culture mistakes is so hard. It takes forever, and it's just a mess. And so, I think it's worth honing in that judgment, spending that time, if you're a founder of a company, especially, to make sure that you're getting the people on the bus who you want your next 10 hires to emulate. And, you know, everyone's got to be rowing in the right direction. And that means that, like, people have to be all signing up for the same thing. And I think that that check-in is really important.
You nailed it. You nailed it. I think culture is the hardest thing to unwind at a company, and candidly, I think there's a point of no return where, it becomes kind of ensconced, and you just can't break it. Like, it's really hard to stop that inertia, because we had the same thing at Triple and Vermont, that it was not a micromanaged thing. It was more so like, is this person gonna vibe with this? And we passed on a few talented people because there was not a judgment or anything, but it wasn't performance. It was more so personality integration. Not that they didn't have a good personality, it was just more compatibility than anything. And I think the one hot take that I'd like to get your I'm curious to hear what you have to say. If I meet that talented asshole,
Hmm.
and again, this might be personal to me because I can kind of manage up and down the personality spectrum. I will not let them in the house, but I will still take their talent, like, as a contractor on the periphery.
Hmm.
Do you have a take on that, or like, or you just no, don't worry, I don't want them. Or I like
No,
to,
no, I think that definitely, at minimum, learn what you can learn, right?
yeah,
Like,
yeah,
if it's undeniable that there's some zone of genius going on, that on its own is potentially useful. I think the question about, like, can you tolerate what comes along with it as a component of your unique culture, is a, team by team, company by company type of
yeah.
decision. But if you can create like the right type of insulation from the
Ooh,
collateral damage,
ooh,
then that might
like
be
that.
okay.
I like that insulation.
But what I'll push back on that is, like, every time I've ever met a genius asshole, I've been able to, maybe take some more time with the recruiting and whatnot, but I've been able to find an equivalent genius without the asshole tendencies if I
Ooh, I
just spend a
like
little bit more
it.
time
Okay.
seeking out that audience. And so sometimes the genius asshole is like a shortcut.
Yep.
You're like, well, I know they can do the thing, and so I'll just deal with this. I would say that in every time I've come across that, I've been able to find the culturally additive version of
Yep.
that and bring that person into the team. But it's a search, right? Hiring is hard. It takes a bunch
So
of time.
hard.
People don't like it because they want to be able to just rely on the brand names. That's another thing I think that I'm interested to get your point of view on. The CEO will be like, oh, this company's hot, so go find people from that company. And I'm like, how do you know what they really did associated with the success? It's like, are they riding on the coattails of the brand, or are they actually the one who drove the growth? It's like in direct to consumer, like everyone's always like, Grun sells for $1 billion. Every agency, contractor, SaaS company on the planet is like, here's how we helped Chad make a billy. Like, who did what really?
Yes.
And so I actually sometimes, if I see too much blue chip on their LinkedIn, I'm actually like, that might be a red flag, because what did they really do in that case? Because then I also think, like, if you're just a marketer who's been at, like, let's say you were like, went from like Stripe to Ramp to Shopify to it's just like all blue chip everything. Then I'm like, if you really were the person who made all of those companies successful, why are you still a marketer? You should be like a partner at Andreessen. Like you're either the smartest, best person ever made, and you picked insane winners, or you probably weren't as responsible as you're going to tell me that you were for why those companies are awesome. That might be a biased take, but like, I always get a little question mark around that.
Oh my gosh, you just opened a can of worms. I love this. I love this. The soda can fell on the floor, and then I just tried to open it. Now the kitchen table is just full of chaos that I'm about to spill. First, I completely agree with you. I think the one caveat I do have is I don't mind I don't mind job hoppers. But if they're parallel job hoppers, that's a red flag for me. Like, if you go from senior marketing manager and then you go to a better company, that's okay. That's
Yeah.
not a parallel move for me. Or if you go from senior marketing manager to VP of marketing or whatever, that's not bad. Like, and you're doing these in 1 to 2 years, that's fine. You're probably bored, you outgrew the company or whatever. But to your point, if you're like Stripe, then Ramp, then Notion, then this, and you're at this like marketing manager level and you're just kind of popping in and out of these parties, I think it's a big that to me is a big red flag. I really look out for that type of job hopping, because there's no like, I'm a big proponent of the devil you know versus the devil
Yeah.
you don't. So it's like, why wouldn't you stay there and try and move up? And more than likely, they weren't that talented. And that brings me to the second point that I'd love to get your take on is every time, and this only applies really to hyper growth slash like early stage startup, probably like 100, 200 people below. Every time we hired that absolute chip killer that was incredible pedigree, they were horrible. They never worked out. And the reason was, one, they were orchestrators, not executors. So they would come in and like, oh yeah, okay, who's going to write the copy? Who's going to do this? You are, dude. Like, well, what are we talking about? Like, get it done. Um, and then the second thing was they were just so well versed in court intrigue, but now they're in a Mongol horde. So like that skill set was not value generative anymore. Where in a bigger company, no shame or anything on it, but like political maneuvering and judgments and things like that is actually like really how you move up in a Fortune 1000. It's not good or bad. It's just an is. And so every big hire that we made that was like, this person was incredible. They did this, they did that. Look at the companies they worked at. It never worked out. It actually less than worked out. It was really a kind of a big shit show. So I would caution any early stage founders out there, big hires. And the other thing is, if you're a killer and you're at like a Klaviyo or a Ramp, why would you leave? Like, what are you
Right.
talking? It's usually like you're a mediocre person. You're probably going to get cut or put on a PIP on the next quarter. And so it's like, let me get out so I can control the narrative. And that has been my experience, is that pedigree very rarely matters in startups. I think really a lot of times, unless you're in that kind of political hiring, I think hacker ethic, what have you built? What have you broken? Like, I want people that actually failed and can show me why they failed in that thought process than perpetual winners that have had this kind of thing. But do you have a take on that?
Dude, I think that I'm a big believer in brand, and I think that brand makes the whole go-to-market machine. It's like the lubrication for the whole
Yes.
go-to-market machine. Like, let's just play out a fake scenario that's definitely gonna happen in the future. Somebody who is a senior account executive at Anthropic is going to make personally $20 million in commissions because they're selling Claude seats and on it, whatever. And they're gonna exit Anthropic in the future, and they're gonna start a consulting firm, and they're gonna get hired by a company to coach them on their sales process. And they're gonna be like, yeah, here's what I did. I picked up the phone, I dialed the person that I wanted to get in touch with. I told them, hey, this is Mike from Anthropic. And every single person picked up the phone and wanted to talk to me about what I was doing. And if you're not, that's just not real life. And if you're with these like brands that have these like blue chip sort of like, one, they're hitting the zeitgeist. They're the category leader. It's like everyone wishes they worked there. Every job that someone's doing, especially in go-to-market in those organizations, is no disrespect to them. Like, get the bag. It's 100%. Amazing. Like, you like ride the rocket ship. Awesome. All of those jobs, though, are way easier because of the company that you're at. And so what I find is that if you're not one of those companies and you're hiring and you're trying to be one of those rocket ship companies, you need people who know how to grind, and those people they haven't had the effect that like our early sellers, a lot of our early sellers at Postscript are still with the company. Like shout out Ellie Carroll. She's been here for 5 freaking years.
Let's go.
The first day that she called said, hey, this is Ellie from Postscript. People were like, what are you talking about? Post what? Like, I don't know what it is. Right. And like, you need people who can grind in that environment. And a lot of these folks have never seen that environment before. And it messes up all over the place, especially the classic one that everyone knows about is the CEO goes and finds the CMO who's like, I'm the CMO for Salesforce Sales Cloud for the last 10 years. That's really cool. And kudos to you. And you've built a huge, crazy thing. Are you the best person to go from a 0 to 1 startup that has precisely 0 customers? Absolutely not. In fact, you're probably the exact wrong person to do that job. And so I think in general, again, gets back to something we were talking about earlier, structured interviewing, knowing what you want and structuring it to make sure you're actually getting the skills that you need, as opposed to just shortcutting on being like, look at this LinkedIn, they're instant hire. That will mess you up for sure. For sure.
No notes. The one thing too, that will give you some free game. I got this from our old sales leader at Fairmont, but you know where he would hire salespeople? He would hire top performers at objectively shitty products. Cause he was like, dude, if they can sell this absolute like shit box of a product and I give them a real product, they're going to go crazy. And he always stayed away from hot kind of product market fit heavy companies because he's like, dude, these are just kicking people into the pool. And isn't specific for sales, where it's just like you have so much brand velocity, so much product market fit that you're an order taker. You're not a salesperson.
Yeah, I think like I'm in Arizona, and like a while ago, the first tranche of sales talent in Arizona came from door knockers who worked at Yelp. So you're like, tell me about your experience. They're like, well, it was 120 degrees outside. I would go drive up to a strip mall with a bunch of businesses in it, and I would go do my thing. And those are like things that you can get if you do structured interviewing, understanding people's backgrounds and stories, to be like, have you actually like manufactured real business on your own in a high difficulty environment? Or did you get to call the CFO of the Fortune 500 company and say, hey, this is Mike from Anthropic? The second thing is way, way, way easier to do. And the job you're probably hiring for is way harder than that.
Bars. Okay, I want to throw 2 more at you before we wrap up the art and science segment. I'm going to give you kind of a dual-headed one, and I want to hear your take. I think it's easier to keep good people than find good people. And I think there's a really cool framework that I subscribe to called the 4S framework. I got this from the Knowledge Project a while back. I forget the guest, but he's awesome. It'll be in the show notes. But he says churn happens at your company there's 4 reasons that people join a company. The story, they believe in the mission, they know what the mission is, they're aligned with the mission. Social, they have a best friend at work. This one's really, really important. Structure, do they have control over their day and time? And then stimulation, are they doing work that is a little bit harder than their skill set? So they're challenged, but they're not overwhelmed because it's too much and it's not beneath their skill set where they become bored. What do you think of the first and the second? So retention, and then what do you think of that framework?
Yeah, I think that, I totally agree with you that it's easier to retain people, good people that you already have on the team. Like there's the relationship there. You theoretically, if you're doing a good job in managing folks, you should know what motivates them personally. Yep. And so, when you think about like the REST framework that you're like, the people probably spike in certain areas of that. Like for me, the story's the whole thing. Like if
Yep.
I don't believe that the company can achieve the thing that it's saying it's going to achieve, which obviously changes over time, then eventually like me and that company aren't going to work out because
Yep.
like I need to be, the evangelist of the thing we're telling everyone we're going to go
Completely.
do. And so if the story breaks for me, then that's usually like the clock's ticking on how long I'm going to be useful there. But everyone indexes in different ways. And I
So well
think
said.
understanding that's the job of the manager.
Yep.
And if you have great people and you want to retain them, you need to know which of those particular filters are most important to them. And then you need to, and then also you need to deliver on stuff. That's the other thing I think
So
people mess up on is like, it's one thing to like know what motivates people and build the relationships and all that sort of stuff. But eventually like the rubber's going to meet the road, and
yep.
you have to be able to deliver on behalf of stuff that your people want, especially your top performers, because
Yep.
they're kind of engaged in this, like you said, it's team, it's not a family, right? So
Yes.
they give us something. Theoretically, they have, wants, needs, professional development, et cetera, things that they're trying to do. We engage in this reciprocal relationship where you give me outcomes, we'll give you back something.
Yes.
If you don't actually deliver on a timeline that you have expected with that person, then eventually the relationship is going to break. Think of like, someone who the team metaphor is perfect. You think like you hire a superstar and they say, cool, I'm going to come here and then I need you to surround me with pieces so we can go win a chip. And then they never surround with the pieces. Eventually the person's like, I'm calling my agent, I'm going somewhere
Yes.
else because you didn't hold up your other end of the bargain.
So well said.
So like that all matters. But I think like the framework, the 4S framework is great. I think the key thing to it is, do you understand where your top performers index inside of that? Because there's
Yes.
definitely one or two of those that they care about way more than the others. And you got to figure out how to optimize for that.
That's a perfect distinction in terms of that, because very rarely you're not going to hit all four at a certain level. And people don't leave because all four are broken. They leave because the one or two that are kind of non-negotiables for them start to erode and decay, and then they can no longer, like for me, a lot of it was structure. When I start to
Hmm.
lose control over my day, I just feel so anxious, and that was something that's really well said. Okay, one more framework and then we'll wrap it up. This one's from Shreyas Dasi,
Hmm.
really smart PM. Love the guy. This is a agency talent quadrant. So agency on the y-axis, talent on the x-axis. So in the upper right, high agency, high talent, or high agency, low talent, or go-getters. In the bottom left quadrant are cogs, low agency, low talent. Don't want to hire those. In the bottom right are frustrated geniuses, high talent, low agency, and then in the top right, high agency, high talent are the game changers. I'll go first on applying this framework, and I'd love to hear how you've experienced it because I find it actually really useful to see this through the framing. I've hired two frustrated geniuses in
Hmm.
my career, and these are the most seductive. Candidly, I've been a frustrated genius in my younger career. Where,
Hmm.
oh, it should be like this. It's this, we could do this so much better. We could do this, but you don't change anything. You just basically bitch, and you're really smart and you're really charismatic and you can articulate your bitching with big words, but you never actually impact things. These are the worst hires you can make. And they're really, really, this is probably where the structured hiring would be really useful, because you can figure out if somebody's a frustrated genius pretty quickly because they live in theory land for so much and they also
Hmm.
see so much of what's wrong, but don't give you an implementation of like, here's what's wrong, here's how I'd fix it. Stay away from frustrated geniuses, two of them in my life. Cogs are kind of self explanatory. Like, these are people that you shouldn't be hiring in the first place. What's interesting is I've hired a few go getters, and those go getters have actually blossomed into game changers. Obviously,
Hmm.
we understand game changers. This goes back to that talent role we were talking about. If you encounter a game changer, it's like a singer-songwriter. Whatever they want, give it to them, find a place on their team. You want as many game changers as possible. But I think the real takeaway is no frustrated geniuses. Be really careful. They're very seductive. And go-getters, man, if you can find some really interesting go-getters, make some bets, because they can be under the right
100%.
management in the right environment. They can grow. The Tom Brady's of the world, right? So for the football analogies, like, this guy was like talented, kind of, but like wasn't this off the charts Jamarcus Russell guy or anything like that. It was just like he was smart, he was talented, but he wasn't this crazy. And man,
Yeah.
all timer, first
I
ballot,
mean,
like probably the best ever.
That's how I was when I started my career. I knew precisely 0 things, had no real marketable skills coming out of ASU. It just was like a guy with a generic bachelor's degree. But for whatever reason, I believed that like I should be making all of the decisions. The
Yeah.
CEO at the company that I first worked for was like, all right, I'm going to actually just feed you because you're either going to like self implode or you'll like figure some stuff out and demonstrate that you actually do deserve to be like making some decisions. And he kind of like gave me a jump ball and I was able to take it. But like I was completely high agency, low talent and started just to learn stuff on the job and ended up
Yeah.
being able to build a career from there. So I totally agree. I look for go-getters anywhere I can because like you can teach people systems, processes, like people don't come out of the womb knowing ball. They
Yeah.
have to learn it,
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so like if you can educate people on that, then I think the agency thing's important. The way I always talk about agency when we're hiring is like my number one thing is like I want people who are curious about shit.
Yes.
And if they're not asking questions or being like, how does this work or whatever, like I'm really, really trying to see like how curious are you about our business and how it's gonna work and like what are the
Uh,
challenges and like that's really like to me in the interview process the thing that tells me this person is high agency because they're like a heat seeking missile to problems. They want to go find out what's blocking this from working better, and I want to identify it, and then I want to have an opinion about how it should be fixed. Is it always going to be right? No, and that's not even important. It's important that you are able to identify the blocker and then you're willing to say, I know I don't know shit, but here's what I think we should do. That is magic. You can use that. That's raw material. And so many people are just like unwilling to, one, they're not curious. And then two, when they are curious, a lot of people are not willing to have an opinion about how to solve the thing that they stumbled upon. When you have the combo of those two things, it's complete magic.
this is so enlightening to me because we both moved to game changers from different quadrants. I came from the frustrated genius quadrant and I needed humility. I need to realize, hey, you don't know everything, idiot. Things like going back to your kind of tying it back to the AI thing you were talking about earlier, like there is actually a method to the madness. These were like really logical reasons that just kind of piled up to make
Right.
this Gordian knot. And then I moved in the game changer. Once I saw that, I was like, hey, it's awesome that you can identify all this stuff as broken and you're smart enough to see the field. But if you don't take action on it, who cares? It's almost worse because ignorance can be bliss. But if you have
Totally.
you know what to do, but you don't do it, that's in my opinion worse. And you came from the curious angle of like, hey man, I don't know what I don't know, but I'm gonna figure it the fuck out. And that moved into the game changer role. So I think that's a really good learning for everybody out there. If you're in that frustrated genius, figure out how to infuse some humility and humbleness into your life to understand that can elevate into the game changer. And then if you're the go-getter, just keep hammering. I loved your curiosity. John Wooden had a great quote, you can't teach height. I
Yeah.
don't know if you can teach curiosity, man. I think some people are just like, I'm gonna climb this mountain, come hell or high water, and that kind of is why they get the label go getter. But that was a really astute realization that I've had from your exquisite prose. Okay, you want to land this plane?
Yeah. Let's do it.
Okay, what do we got next? Next is the quick tulip. So we'll be recommending cool things that Mike and I use. I'm going to go this week. I'm a huge planner. So I use the Intelligent Change Productivity Monthly Desk Pad. It's fantastic. It has a timeline. It has my intentions. It has my gratitudes. But what's really cool about it, and you would like this tying into the AI, there's I'll do all my to-dos and stuff, but there's a rating at the bottom and a mood rating at the bottom. So I do, like I said, daily. So I took pictures of all these, all my journals, because this is analog. I put like analog. And then I threw that to the robots. And I told me, like, hey, help me optimize my life and tell me what I can do to get higher rating days, get higher rating moods. And it was actually really incredibly insightful. And one of the things that it came back with was something called MIT's most important tasks. When I have 1 to 3 tasks for the day, I'm actually more productive, I'm happier, and I rate the day higher versus when I fill out I think there's like 5 big tasks and like 6 beneath that. When I fill everything out, I barely get anything done. I usually don't get the most important tasks done. And so that was a really interesting learning for me. So for all the people out there that enjoy journaling, even if you don't use the intelligent change, take a picture of it and go back through and see. It's hard to live in the present and analyze the past at the same time. And I think you should be present. But when you
Yeah.
can have your cake and eat it too is a really cool exercise for me. So try that out. And I really do love, I've been using this thing for like 4 years now. It's fantastic. Intelligent Change Productivity Planner. We'll put a link in there. All right, let's sign us off. So this is off the record. What are we doing here? We're doing some stoicism here. So basically, the off the record is just kind of going to be different closing breaks. So what's your stoic take on all this, on all the hiring, Mike? What are you going to drip into our wonderful listeners' ears to send them off into the sunset until episode 2?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of the Stoics. I think you probably see a bunch of stuff behind me by Mr. Holiday himself and the originators of the Stoic tradition. I think the big thing that comes out is for me at least is, it's all about the journey. It's all about the repetitions. And I think, we talked a little bit about hiring and wanting to get to vibes takes pattern recognition.
Yeah.
The only way to get to Rick Rubin level hiring is to get the reps in the first place and do the structured thing. And so this is all like a skill ladder. Like the journey is the thing that hones the taste level. And so, as it relates to hiring, I really think, the focus on the reps, focus on making your, especially, I know there's all these tools around. There's like, Lattice this and software that, and it all is ATS and whatever. Focus on trying to hone in your interviewing skill. When you're one-on-one with someone, what are you looking for? How do you do it? What's your method? What do you, and what patterns are you taking from it? I think that honed over the course of a career and focusing on that journey will help you eventually get to, hopefully, Rick Rubin status hiring, where you can just go squint your eyes and go right off of intuition.
I haven't,
but it's a journey to get there. Not every, you don't have that from day one. And so you got to build it.
dude, I love that. Keep hammering, get the reps in. That's exactly right. No notes there. And I think we can take another swing at another philosophy with Confucius that a diamond with the flaw is better than a pebble without. So keep hammering. This too shall pass. We really appreciate you guys joining us. Mike is all over the Twitters. Are you Mike or Michael?
Mike Manheimer, everywhere you want to find me. And Twitter, LinkedIn, all that.
I love it. I'm Rabah Rahil on all the socials as well. So go follow us, ping us, let us know what you want to talk about. And then also there will be in a company newsletter. Go sign up unscalable.show. You'll see all the episodes, newsy, everything there. And we'll have basically playbooks and guides for all the episodes. So this one will obviously be the playbook for unscalable hiring. We appreciate you guys joining on the first show. Anything else, Mike?
No, appreciate everyone listening. Can't wait to do more of these. If you have thoughts, feedback, that we're obviously all about the feedback. So hit us up, especially if you disagree. That'll be the best feedback. So see you guys on episode 2.
All right. See you, folks. Bye-bye.